Well, time for class to be over. This clock says it's 8 o'clock. We better go. We can let out and go home now. You guys put up with it. Somebody needs to change the time on that, I guess. We'll see if we can. Come on. No. You got to stay now. This is like being in school and getting detention. You have to come in here and sit down and stay for a while. What kind of deal is that? All right, glad you're here this evening. Now, next Wednesday evening is the Wednesday right before Thanksgiving. So if you want to bring a piece of pumpkin pie, no, just kidding. Anyway, we will have a devotional here, a themed, thoughtful, I don't know, we'll figure it out as we go. Anyway, we will have a devotional. We will not have a regular class next week, but we will have a devotional we traditionally do on that Wednesday evening before Thanksgiving, and that's what we'll plan to do next Wednesday evening. So stay healthy, stay well, go on a diet now, get it over with between now and then just eat everything you want on Thanksgiving Day, and eat everything you want, get your belly filled up, then lay back and watch some football or fall asleep while football is being played. That's just what Thanksgiving ought to be. But actually, you're supposed to get out in the morning with your friends and play football, and then eat, and then lay down and watch football if you haven't knocked all your teeth out. Anyway, it's just, I'm sorry. Glad you're here this evening. It is a good evening. It's kind of windy a little bit, makes it feel pretty chilly outside, but I'm glad you're here. Glad we can get together. And, well, I don't know what I need to say, anything else in that regard this evening. But we'll get into our study this evening. We're in the next to the last. I thought we were going to be in our last session. I got in there and I realized, there's one more, but we'll see what we can do. But this evening we're going to be looking, if you picked up one of the sheets back there, we're in strategy number 19. And it's titled, that's probably not the best title when I got to looking at it later, Keep Your Word. It means basically be true to yourself or true to your word in that regard. And that's what we're going to get to in this evening. Before we get into our study and discussion this evening and deal with our questions as we typically do, let's pause. We'll have a word of prayer, and then we'll get right back into this. So if you'd pray with me. Dear God and Father, again, for the opportunities, the blessings, the rich treasures this day. And Father, you blessed us so much. You've given us so much and so many things, and we're almost like spoiled children, I think. And yet, Father, you continue to bless us and give us these things every day. And for days like today, we are truly thankful. Help us to appreciate that these gifts are from you and how wonderful and how blessed they are. Father, remind us of how fleeting life is, that we might treasure our times together, our times with one another, and the gift of each thing around us. Help us to be aware of that. For the things that we enjoy every day, for the fellowship we share here, again, Father, we count it a rich treasure. As we endeavor to study this evening, help us to have absorbing minds of your word. Help us to be conscious in our thinking, and help us to be aware of one another in all that we do. Be with our loved ones who are dealing with struggles and illness, and we pray that we might be an asset and an encouragement to them in any way possible. And now, Father, we pray that you will strengthen us in doing right, forgive us for any sin in our lives, and help us to always be aware and true to you. And it is in Jesus we pray. Amen. We'll continue to look at Matthew. We're getting right near the end of Matthew. This is another one in the 26th chapter, which is packed with so many things. In Matthew, the 26th chapter, there's several things in there. But this is a portion of that section where Jesus is called into the council, to the Sanhedrin, the court, where all kinds of accusations are being made against him. They brought in false witnesses, and their stories are not even gelling together. And there is one that came in and said, hey, listen, I heard him say, destroy the temple, and in 3 days I'll build it up. Did Jesus say that? Yes, but the context or the meaning behind it was all disturbed from what they were trying to make it out to be, as if he was literally going to tear down the stones of the temple outside. But they were using anything they could and tried to find against him, and they really couldn't get him to respond, couldn't get him to say anything. He just stood there and wouldn't answer their questions because, well, you can understand why that's the case. Finally, the high priest said, you got to tell us. Are you the Son of God? Are you the Son of God? Verse 64. Let me jump ahead. Verse 64. Jesus said to him, "It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." You don't get this out of Jesus much. Many times they tried to press him for direct answers like this. Many times they wanted him to say that he truly was the Son of God. But until he comes to this point where he is before the council on this occasion and finally said, "It is as you said." In other words, yes, you're right. So that's where we are. And I think we're talking about Jesus being true to himself. And one of the great lessons that we learn in life is to avoid that kind of facade or hypocrisy in life, to be who we are, to be honest about who we are. That doesn't mean you just say, "Well, I'm a rotten scoundrel, so I'm going to be a rotten scoundrel. I just got a bad attitude, so I'm just going to show a bad attitude." That's not what we mean. Everybody's got to just take me like I am. Well, to some degree they're going to, but that doesn't mean you got the excuse to just go out and be whatever reprobate you want to be in the eyes and the minds of people. It doesn't mean you can abuse people just because you feel like it. That's not what I'm talking about. But to be true to yourself means, who are you? What kind of character do you want to display in your life? And to be accurate and true in that, so that you're presenting in word and in action exactly who you are. If you go to Hamlet, you recognize the lines from Hamlet about being true to yourself, but I like to draw it from Gilligan's Island. If you ever watched Gilligan's Island, you may remember one of the outstanding episodes of Gilligan's Island is they put on Hamlet as a musical. Anybody else remember that? Okay, two. Some of you barely will admit it. You sorry things. Some of you watch it. I tell you, what's he doing in this class anyway? All right. Anyway, if you know the gist of Gilligan's Island, they decide, and there's some reasons why they decide to put on Shakespeare's Hamlet. Anyway, they put on Hamlet, and then they sing, one of the songs they sing, they're drawing from what Polonius says to Laertes in the play, and it's put to music and says, "There's just one other thing," I'm not going to sing it, "there's just one other thing you ought to do, to thine own self be true." And that's basically what he says, what Polonius says in the real play and everything. And that's kind of silly to bring it out of Gilligan's Island, but for some reason that one stuck in my head from many, many years ago, and we'll talk about what it is later. But I don't know why I can remember those things, but I can't remember the scripture I read this morning. There's just something wrong with part of my thinking. But seriously, that's there. And I think when we really get down to think about it, and what I'm trying to get across, and I'm drawing from this, and of course, all of this is leaning from what I'm pulling out of this, and this idea of being true to yourself or keeping your word, is that idea of the one thing that you've got that you can stand by is your own integrity, the integrity of who you are. We look at some people in our culture, in our time, our politicians, for example, get the name of saying one thing, but really not being that truly. It's hard to tell what they are. Do they remain true to themselves? Will they bend to the pressure of the people who want them to be something other than what they are? And we see that a lot in some situations. But the basic idea that I want to get to in this evening is that let's be honorable to ourselves, clear of who we are, so that we understand that we fit into the pattern that Jesus is establishing. He wants to be clear about who he is. He doesn't want it going out there in rumor and innuendo. He doesn't want it presented in some unseemly way, but he wants it to be exactly what he has said it is. That's why he's been so hesitant in part to state, "Yes, I am the Christ, the Son of the living God." And so many times he says, "Don't tell people, don't tell people, don't tell people." And I think generally we like for people to be true to their word around us. You know, if they say something, we want them to present themselves honorably. We want them to tell us the truth in all things. It's not a matter of whether we'll change our minds or something. But I think about the words that Paul shares. He says, I know whom I have believed in and persuaded that he is able to keep what I've committed to him until that day. That's 2 Timothy 1:12. When he makes that statement, he has absolute confidence in the Lord and what the promise is for him. And how much confidence do we have in other people? Will they really stand up for what they've said? Will they really stand behind what they've presented? And so this is the idea of keeping your word, of being honorable to who you are, who you presented yourself to be. And so that's where we are. And Jesus' response to the council on this occasion, especially the high priest, is, you've said who I am, and I want you to know something. You're going to see even more than this. Sounds a little bit familiar. Remember, there was another occasion where a man was brought to him, and he said, you think that was something? You're going to see even more than that down the road. Anybody remember that guy's name? I didn't depict it. How about Nathaniel? Remember when Nathaniel was brought to Jesus? He said, he believed him because he said, I saw you under the tree. So he said, you believe because of that? Wait, buddy, you're going to see a whole lot more than this. And I think that's what he's telling the high priest. And I hate to bring it down to that level, but it's that idea you really haven't seen, or you ain't seen nothing yet. You haven't seen anything yet in that regard. There's so much more going to happen. So, but back to this. With that in mind, we'll look at some thoughts in regard to this as Jesus puts it out there. As we look at ourselves and we consider this, drawing from the text, we ask and look at the question, and what question was being put to Jesus, and why is it being asked? Why is this question being asked of Jesus? What's the question? Are you the Son of God? Why are they asking that question? Do what? It's a trap. What kind of trap are we talking about? What? Blasphemy. Okay, blasphemy. What? Yeah. Okay. That's right. They kind of put him in a position where he doesn't have much option to tell them something else. And maybe we'll say a little more about that in a minute. But he's there under pressure. He's got Annas, he's got Caiaphas, he's got the whole council there, as you say, pressing on him. Everything is stacked up on this occasion. It is stacked up. Yeah. And you're exactly right. And it comes down to the point, his time is at hand. He knows what's coming in the next few hours. And it is time to make this very clearly known. But the reason they want to ask the question is they want to trap him. They want to catch him. You said the word blasphemy. Well, would that bother us today? So somebody stood up in here today and said, hey, I'm the Son of God. How we feel about it? They're out of their mind. Well, I say, well, in a sense, we're all children of God, right? Right. But in that sense that they were making, equating with deity, I am the Son of God. If I stood up here this evening and said, by the way, I've been with you guys, some of you have been around 21 years, you know. I just want you to know finally. You'd say, uh-oh, I think we need to go get his head checked out pretty quick, you know. Something's desperately wrong. But, yeah, that's the way we would look at it. They saw it. They saw it as an approach or a breaking of the law. Because you go back to the very beginning, the very basic commandment is what? I'm the Lord your God. No other gods and everything. And so they saw anyone equating himself with God to be blasphemy and breaking the law. Yes, Jenny Lou? Okay. You're right. They had seen many of his miracles. They even recognized, and some of them say, yes, we know these are miracles. You remember what Nicodemus said when he came to Jesus? We know, John chapter 3, we know that you're from God. Who's he talking about? We. The others around it, the people, the others in the county. He was a part of this county. He was sitting right there probably when this is going on. That's who he's talking about. They had seen the miracles. but there were other things at stake in their minds besides that. So they were just looking for somebody, you said trap him several times, said trap him. And so that's what this is about. That's why this is being asked. If we can get him to say something like this, then we can bring an accusation against him that can ultimately bring about maybe even his death. That's what they're thinking about right then. Okay? Good thoughts, good thoughts. Okay, so what kind of assurance did the high priest associate with the required answer? I guess I've really already answered that. I mean, we've already answered it. If he says that, what's going to happen? Okay. They could legitimately, under their law, be able to take him out, stone him to death right then. Blasphemy was a death offense. Anyway, when it comes down to this point, the high priest is in a box. They've tried really hard to find something of which they can accuse Jesus. What's the problem? What's the problem? Why didn't they just take him out behind the temple somewhere and put him to death? Did you say the Roman law? Yeah, the Romans really didn't give them latitude to do it. Now, they did it anyway sometimes. We find that later. Of course, Stephen is put to death. Yeah, he's stoned to death out there. And it happened. It did. But not necessarily as a sanctioned part of the council. And we're talking about the council doing that. So the Romans kind of looked the other way in some things. In fact, Pilate, you remember a little bit later, Pilate says, "See to it yourselves." And they said, "We're not allowed to do that." So they sound like good citizens. So the Roman law would not allow them to do it. Is there any other reason? Okay. The Romans and others, they would have known he was a very public figure, well known in the time, and so forth. And so this would have been, it's difficult. It gets more difficult when you're dealing with a public figure rather than Joe Blow out here that nobody's going to miss. Okay? Good? Right. Yes. That's right. They feared they would lose their place, that the Romans would destroy their government. They allowed them a lot of latitude to continue their government and so forth. And if they did this, then they feared the Romans. They feared the Roman law at that point would dismember them. And they used that to keep from killing him in a way, and yet to want to bring about his death. And so they'd been trying to figure out exactly how to do this for a while. I heard somebody say something else a while ago. They were afraid of the people. I think you're right. Is that where you were going, Dwayne? Okay. Yes. Okay. You're exactly right. And we recognize, when are they doing this? At night. Illegally, according to their tradition, their law, and so forth. They were doing this illegally. Anyway, okay. Well, they've got it all figured out. The high priest, if he gets the right answer out of this, then he's got the law on his side. It's not just them against him, it is the law that he's dealing with. And so then, as they do in the morning, they can take him to the Romans and say, this guy has broken the law and he's got to die. And that carried some weight in that regard. Well, what implications for Jesus were there to giving an answer at all? It was time. Yes. If we look at the time frame, and Jesus has used that sense at different points in his ministry, that time and the situation and all, and you can see, and if you follow his ministry much, you can see how things develop as he gets down to this point, and more he said, you guys need to realize what's about to happen. And so even that night, he's told his closest disciples. So the time is there. So the implications are, okay, this is going to set things, if he answers, it's going to set things in motion that he's been telling would happen down the way. Yes, sir. That's right. That's right. If he answers this in the affirmative, then he is basically putting himself in the position of condemnation by them. Yes. Of course, we recognize it's true, so it really doesn't condemn him since it's true, but from their standpoint, that would be a condemnatory thing. It's, they're just seeing it from that perspective, and he knows that. Whether they're seeing it right or not is not the material. They're seeing it from their perspective, and so from their perspective, then he's wrong, blasphemous to do this or to say this thing. So there is that implication. But what if he doesn't answer? What if he doesn't answer the question? Okay. They are determined to find something. They've been working on this for a while. Even the using of Judas to get him and bring him in, they're not going to let this go. They're not going to let it go on this occasion. They're going to figure out something. They're going to lie about it if they've got to. They've paid people to say what they've been saying and so forth. So there's a whole lot of that. Has Jesus truly addressed this direct question prior to this time? Yes. What has he told them? Do what? Well, on this occasion he says, you said it. But I mean prior to this, earlier in his ministry. Okay. In the closed group, yes, he admits it right there. With the close group of whatever disciples were with him on that occasion when Peter makes that, he did. Sometimes he would say something like, you can read the prophets. You can read the law. In them you read of me. But he doesn't come out and generally directly answer the question in the way that he does here. Like, you guys got it. You got it figured out. There's more than one way to answer this question and still answer it somewhat in the affirmative, but leave it to the implied minds of those around him. That's a clever tactic, and he's been doing that for a while. Okay. He did, and as he reads and he says, this day this prophecy is fulfilled. And you think, uh-oh, and what happened there? They got all turned upside down about it. Said, who does this guy think he is? And so they kind of got the drift of this. But generally speaking, he would avoid a direct answer to this question up to this point. Now, others might say it. There had been others of his disciples come along and said, listen, we found him. This is the promised one. This is the Christ. And of course, Peter, on two different occasions, Peter says, we've come to believe that you're the Christ. There in Matthew 16 as well as in John 6, he comes up with that response in that regard. In this case, let's see. Okay, I got to go to the next slide. I didn't get number 5. Could Jesus have avoided answering? Could he? Well, we kind of dealt with it. Could he have avoided answering the question? He never really fully avoided. He always had something to say. Even when the adulterous woman was brought to him and it looked like he was just not going to answer the question, you remember, finally he does come out with a response. He would have a response. He would almost always have some sort of response to them. As I said, sometimes it was, let me make you think about this. He would have a response, but could he have avoided answering the question? Did he need to answer the question? Yes, he did. I think you're right. For once, it's time. And we've said that already. For what other reason would he need to really answer this question? He needed to be true to who he was. They were going to kill him anyway. They were going to find a way to kill him anyway. If he does not answer the question, they kill him and the confirmation is not there. In this way, when he says who he is, at least the statement is out there. It's out there. Whether they believe him or not is not important. He has made the statement. It's out there and it's in front of them. With that in mind. So, Jesus answers this question, but he doesn't just answer the question. He adds to it. He qualifies it more. Notice what he said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man, referencing himself, sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Why in the world does he add that in? Okay. Yes, and this would be understood as somewhat prophetic discussion or talk. Go back and read some of the Old Testament prophets and the way they describe things. Is Jesus literally, is he speaking in a very literal sense, the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven? This is a dramatic picture that he's drawing, that he's wanting to say this is a powerful situation. I'm not just some guy you're going to kill out here because I'm the Son of God and I'm gone. He's basically saying to them, no matter what happens here tonight, the greatness of God's work is going to take place, and it's going to take place through me. You're not going to kill God's work. It's interesting that a little bit later, Gamaliel would say, if this thing is of God, we can't be standing against it. And I think about this, and here's this guy that's sitting on this council right now. I assume he's there. And later, when he's dealing with Peter and John, and he starts saying, if this is of men, it's going to come to nothing. Look at the others and what's happened to them. But if this thing is of God, we best not be standing against it. I kind of wondered, was there a little bit of an impact from what had happened at this point and with the resurrection of Jesus and so forth? We don't want to be standing in a place denying God. Yes. Yes. Well, I wasn't there, but I've assumed it is. I didn't go up and ask him, are you the same guy? No. I think so. Now, it's not a name that would be that unusual. It could be more than one, but I've always taken it to be the same guy. Because that would lend an air of authority when he says, listen, I was trained at the feet of Gamaliel. Okay. You got it. And that would make more sense to them. Okay, so we got that. Let's see and the consequences of the answer, he knows, right? He knows what's about to happen. Consequences of the answer. Do you ever stop and think about the consequences of what you say? Not often enough. Do you ever say things and not think about what might happen? One of my favorite things that I share with Kyle, and I get into some discussions sometimes, and he'll say, do you think this is a good thing to do? And I'll say, well, buddy, you can do anything you want to do, but you know what I have to tell myself from time to time is you can do about anything you want to do as long as you're willing to live with the circumstances. Good or bad, If you want to tell your wife exactly what you think, that's fine. But you better be ready to live with the circumstances. I wasn't talking about him saying that. I was just talking in general, but we talk about those things and we have a good time with them because, anyway, we have a lot of fun with some of that stuff. Anyway, but consequences to the answer. Jesus knows there are consequences to this statement. He knows and we look at him early on, part of the reason he hasn't answered directly because there are consequences. You remember what he told his mother when she brought to him the problem about the wine at the wedding feast. My time has not yet come. And I think it's the same reason he tells others along the way when he's healed or he's taught or something, and they look at him and he says, now don't go tell anybody. But they do anyway. So sometimes I wonder why he told them that, because they're going to go tell anyway. But that's what happens. Do what? Okay, you're right. Right now, he's answering this in a court of law. This is that deal. I sort of solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. He's in court, and he's answering that, and this is the astute leadership of his country, and they've all heard it. Wow. This is not just out in the square among a bunch of people. This is not out walking down the road. This is not those Galileans that he's been traveling with. This is there among the elite of their time and place. And he makes the statement. Very good. Thoughts or questions at that point? Okay, let's go to the next level then. We'll go to double jeopardy here. Okay. What does it mean to not keep your word as a Christian? What can that mean? All right, we use the word hypocrite, don't we? You become a hypocrite. But aren't there some circumstances when you just, kind of like here with Jesus, if he could have just said, no, I'll just go along with you guys, kind of slide out of here and do this. There's the Old Testament story of Naaman. After he's been to the river, he's dipped 7 times, comes up clean. He goes back to see Elisha, and he's gathered up dirt. He wants to take some of that dirt home because he wants to use it and pray on it. He says, but I need this one exception. I'm going to worship only the Lord, but I need one exception. When the king goes in, I have to stand at his right side or whatever when he goes in to pray to their God and everything. I've got to go in with him in front of our idol, our God. How would you feel about that? So, buddy, either you're going to serve the Lord or you're not going to serve the Lord, right? But he's in a difficult circumstance. Haven't you ever found yourself in a difficult circumstance and you felt, well, maybe it's justified to say this or not say this? What do you think? Are there times that it's all right to just not really be who you are? You guys are looking at me pretty skeptically. On the surface, we say no. In practice, we probably do slide that one a little bit, don't we? Now, come on, let's just be honest with ourselves. It may not be some big thing. We don't go out and say, oh, today I'm going to deny the Lord. That's not what I'm saying. But maybe we're just not going to be as forthright as we want to be. Just those kind of like white lies. What's that? If you're wearing a dress, oh, okay, you're using a hypothetical. You're not talking about yourself in a dress. Okay, very good. You look fantastic. I don't care what dress you've got on, Roger. You look fantastic. Okay, good. Okay. 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 That was part of his job. Okay, thank you for picking apart my illustration, but that's just okay. No, you're right. It's a very good point. You're right. And sometimes we are in circumstances that are beyond our control because of our situation in life and so forth. And you're right. Sometimes you're asked the question that you really don't want to give an honest answer to because it's going to hurt somebody. And I have something about here. Some of the reasons why we would not express and identify ourselves. And I should say with complete honesty, I put clearly with complete honesty. Are there some circumstances that we in our minds feel like it's justifiable to kind of maybe not lie, but push the truth aside for just a moment? Kind of pretend it's not there for a while? Okay. Well, that's right. Okay. So this evening, when you get home and your wife asks you something and you say, honey, you just don't need to know that. Now, you call me and tell me how that works for you. No, I'm just kidding. But you're exactly right. We wouldn't use those terms necessarily always, but sometimes with our children, especially say, later on, I'll explain that to you at another time when you can understand that more. You are right on target with that. Okay. Sometimes the information doesn't need to be in the ears of somebody else, or it can do harm to somebody else in that regard. And so we withhold something. I think there are times that if we even profess our faith to people, we're going to probably do more damage than we do good. When I say profess our faith, I'm not talking about how we live. I'm talking about maybe jumping into a conversation or jumping on somebody else with it and say, let me tell you what I know. Not everybody's ready to hear that always. You know, sometimes there's got to be good circumstances within that. You know, anybody in here ever get into a political discussion? You ever get into political discussions? Nope. Okay, you guys are not telling the truth in here. We're going to have to be on the front row with the invitation. If you get into, and it doesn't have to be an ugly one, but even a light one, don't you sometimes reserve? Don't you sometimes get a little bit reserved because you know if you press the point that you believe that might differ from somebody else's, that it's going to be, you're not going to do any good. I'll just put it that way. You're not going to do any good with it. Don't we do that in some circumstances? I think we do. Even if it's children or not children, there can be greater opportunities. There can be more at stake than just you being able to say what you want to say, when you want to say it, and how you want to say it. Do what? Proving your point. Yeah, sometimes proving your point is not, doesn't win an argument. Okay, Arliss, and then Keith. Well, I don't even have to answer that. I'm going to be the only one there. It's going to be lonely, but I'm going to be the only one there. Yeah, sometimes people ask something, and you want to be very cautious in how you respond to a question. You think you're the only one that has an answer. What is it Job says? You think wisdom is going to die with you? Yeah, so it's a good point. Keith, you had something. Okay. Okay. Exactly. Okay. So we've got an example in Jesus, not always giving a direct answer to something. That means being thoughtful about how we present, how we speak, how we address things, being thoughtful about it. And that goes back to what we were talking about a while ago in terms of there are consequences to what we have to say. You say something, there's going to be consequences to what you have to say. And sometimes those consequences are unpleasant. You know, you talk about having to eat your words. They can be pretty distasteful at times when that happens. That's kind of what we're dealing with. Okay, well, are there any specific situations or reasons out there? I mean, you said if it's going to hurt somebody, that's one, and all. Somebody's not ready to accept it. Are there any other, can you think of any other specifics where you would not really want to identify yourself clearly? Shame? From what perspective when you say shame? Okay. Good point. Good point. We don't know how they're going to respond if I put myself out there. I can be abused readily within that. Very good point. Very good point. How is this going to come back again? And that gets back into more consequences in that regard. Good. Others. I ask that because I thought sometimes we'd like to say something, but we're not really living what we want to say. And you talked about a disconnect. Then there's a disconnect. You say, oh, well, let me tell you how it is. And I always think, well, if you've got so much knowledge about it, why aren't you living it? What's the deal, in that regard? And all you got, it's walk the talk the walk, which you going to be, how's it going to work? I didn't say that right on purpose. Anyway, okay. There's some of the reasons and everything that we've looked at here. Okay. Running short on time, so let's look quickly. What are some of the difficult to answer questions that the world wants to know from Christians like you and me? Are there any specific difficult questions that are difficult for you or me to respond to? What's that? Okay. Okay. It's a good point. What does God think of this or that? And kind of putting you in the position of being God's voice. That's right. Okay. I'm thinking along that line, sometimes somebody will say, well, do you think I'm lost? Well, do I think you're lost? It doesn't really matter what I think in regard. I'll come back and say, well, it doesn't really matter what I think, but let's look at it together, and see. Because what I think doesn't determine your salvation. I might be right. I hope I am, but it goes back to what the Scriptures teach, of course, in that regard. It can be a difficult question. Do you think I'll be lost just because and then put an act of some kind in there, whatever it is. Just because I won't forgive Jenny Lou for messing me up this evening. No, that wasn't true. No, somebody will ask, do you think I'll be lost because? And they'll give you some specific, whatever it is. It could be large, could be small. And they want to know what you think. And that can put you in a very awkward position in that regard. Okay? Well, just a minute, I'll come back. Yeah. Okay. Yes, we want to turn it back to the sovereignty of God, not determine, is this person lost or saved? And I appreciate you saying that, because there have been several occasions through the years where somebody's family member will have died and said, well, do you think Mama was or Daddy was this or that? And I'm thinking, oh, please don't ask me that question. But I really believe it's in the hands of the sovereign God and whatever in that case. And that's what I generally will do. I'm not in God's position. All I can do is take what I understand and use it, apply it, teach it as best I can. Okay, Jenny. Right. That's, you're right. We judge the outward appearance, and this is what Samuel recognized when picking out the king. You remember going through Jesse's sons. He said, man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks upon the heart. And he knew. Okay, let's see, when are some of the appropriate times to vary from verbal commitment? Really, they'd be pretty limited. That's probably not a good one. We'll leave that one behind because we're down to the last one. Why is it so important? Why? That's it. Why is it so important? Why is it so important that you be true to who you are? You're just one person. Why is it so important that you be true to who you are? Trust in what sense? Okay. Trust in yourself, trust in others, trust in God. How about what people trust in you? What people trust in you. If we're not true to ourselves, if we hypocritical or pretense, and as we've pointed out, it can be difficult in certain circumstances, little circumstances sometimes. Generally in the large ones it's not that difficult, but in the smaller ones, in those fringe areas and so forth, that often get a little attention. Say, yeah, he's great over here, but did you ever notice what he's doing here? Okay. It's important because then that lends doubt to people and that trust is diminished. You had something, Keith? It damages the faith of both parties. Very, very, very good point. Very good point. All right, let's be true to ourselves. Polonius to Laertes. I'll be Polonius. You be Laertes, and be true to yourself. A couple of weeks from now, if all goes well, we'll look at this. Here it is. It's the answer to all your questions. Live beyond your years. Okay? Okay. Thank you very much. Very good thoughts this evening, especially mine.